You know what? That's what happens when you do a Meme Wars on Friday last week and then you forget to change the intro music. Well, you get to see the intro for Meme Wars. That is a behind the paywall show now that we used to do here on Lions of Liberty as a public show. So if you want more of Meme Wars, you could go and join the Patreon at patreon.com/Lions of Liberty or lionsofliberty.locals.com. That will give you access to that with this rockin' theme song. I'll have to make sure to change in my other outro for the next one. Anyway, welcome to the show. I have basically, I wanted to talk about a couple of things here. One of which I could not get around how insane the irony was that we have a situation wherein the asshole filmmakers of The Silence of the Lambs, which is an iconic film, right? It was a film that was brilliant, ahead of its time, based off a book, and had a strong female lead, right? We were always talked about these female leads. Well, you had a really fascinating female lead in, what was her, like Officer Starling or something, and played by Jodie Foster. But you had a fascinating scenario wherein you have this, very bright female police officer, FBI agent, who is not a girl boss. She is very smart, but she has flaws. She has character development. She comes up. It's an iconic character for the exact same reason so many former, female leads were iconic in these movies before idiot woke Hollywood took over and made a cliche out of everything and anything. But what the craziest thing is these filmmakers came out talking about this character of Buffalo Bill. And it was like one of the producers and the actor that played Buffalo Bill. And they were on some interview show and they go, well, we really feel terrible about it. Oh, we shouldn't have done that. This is reported in the Hollywood Reporter and gets echoed everywhere. But, oh, my God, the portrayal of the trans community in this way is just evil and wrong, and we shouldn't have done it. And Buffalo Bill's character, it's just portraying him as a violent man. And okay, so they're out there saying this dumbass shit. And of course, we're in the midst of what can only be called a pandemic of trans shooters. I mean, over and over and over again, we're seeing that trans males, especially, typically it's been male to female, but we've had a couple the other way too, have been the ones that are losing their minds, shooting up schools, shooting up, public places. And the most recent example of this, well, two recent examples. One was in Canada with somebody doing a mass shooting. And then the most recent of which just happens to be a man. And I had shared this as the photo on the actual podcast episode, but let me open this up if you're watching live here. And apologies, it seems like we're not live streaming to Twitter. There must be an issue. I got an error message. But here you go. This is the actual person who shot up a hockey rink during his son's, I think, late high school, or maybe it was a college game for his son who's about to be married. This psychopath goes in there after transitioning from male to female, quote unquote, male to female, goes by Roberta Esposito, shoots up a hockey rink and kills his wife, kills his son, and one son, I believe, was injured, and then made it, it will presumably will keep living. Robert Dorgan, who was a trans, calling himself Roberta Esposito. And the irony here that these guys are out there talking about Buffalo Bill and saying, oh, this character is so out of context and never. And you've got a guy that literally looks exactly like the Buffalo Bill character who just murdered his family in cold blood in public because they did not appreciate his transitioning and leaving. Like his wife divorced him. What did you think was going to happen, guy? What did you think was going to happen? When you turn into a woman, is your wife going to want to stay with you? Of course she's not. So this psychopath goes and shoots his family up 2 days after people are coming out and talking about this Buffalo Bill situation. Now, here's the real irony, though, is that I had talked about this before, how, in my opinion, transism is without a doubt is a mental illness. Now, the question is, how do you treat that mental illness? If it's by making somebody into a woman, you're allowing them that transition and they live a peaceful, happy life that is intrusive into other people's lives, aka not superseding the rights of others, not being violent, not being aggressive, as we see so many of these people are, well, then fine. The problem is that we're seeing trans as a blanket solution that has been applied, especially during the affirmative care era, to all sorts of mental problems. That this was a blanket, quote unquote, cure all for so many other inflictions and problems that people had, afflictions, that people had, and so many different mental problems that they gravitate towards trans. And here is a direct quote from the book of Silence of the Lambs, by the way. This is a Hannibal Lecter line. Billy, aka Billy Bob, is not Buffalo Bill. Billy is not a transsexual, not a real one. There are 3 major categories for transsexual surgery. I wouldn't be surprised if Billy had applied for sex reassignment at one or all of them and been rejected. Billy hates his own identity, you see, and he thinks that makes him a transsexual. That is a pretty incredible statement, especially considering the context of these people coming out and condemning the Buffalo Bill character and having, making him trans and yada, yada, and how that was so wrong. But it speaks to my point and what I think is happening here. That yes, you have people that hate who they are. And the answer here is not to get mental health, to work through your problems, your trauma, to figure out what is broken inside of you, to treat that in the appropriate way. Going and saying, well, transsexual, that's why I'm clearly supposed to be a woman, when you're not treating the core mental problem. You're not treating the actual mental illness here. You're simply putting a solve on it that's going to wear off in a very short amount of time. And you see this, these people have fucking psychotic problems. In like 90% of the cases here, they are not quote unquote transsexual, but yet it's being applied, diagnosed, and treated as though all of these people have what is legitimately a transsexual mindset, and that can be quote unquote cured by becoming a person of the opposite sex. You're seeing that this is not the care model that needs to be applied in most circumstances. These violent reactions, these people who have broken brains, need to be treated differently than simply saying it's time to get a dick or time to get a vagina. It's unbelievable, and it's very, very, I'm not going to say rewarding, but it is very placating to my point of view that you're seeing these things play out exactly how I said they were going to play out. And, it's to me, the symptoms and the cure were very obviously incorrect in their, how they were assessed and how they were treated. So the most annoying thing to me too is that these people, similar to, and we're going to talk about more about this in a minute, similar to COVID, similar to the Epstein files now, which we'll talk about in a moment, the whole issue of trans, just like mass immigration as well. These are issues in which people refuse to back down on. And just like with COVID, where if you had an opinion on COVID, and that opinion on COVID happened to be in line with mass vaccinations, which happened to be in line with you're not allowed to go out of your house, which happened to be in line with you should be ostracized from the community, you should be fired from your job, you should be reported to the police for having a gathering, you should be condemned if you try to go to your father's funeral. The people that forced this on society and that felt so morally superior doing it cannot accept that COVID was, in fact, overblown, a power grab, one of the worst things that's ever happened to humanity, one of the stupidest things for people to go along with, and that they were wrong. They cannot accept that because that would make them bad people. And their egos, their fragile egos that they put so much on the line for and did so much damage to society by pushing forward these terrible, terrible procedures and understandings and lies. If they admit that they were wrong, they are admitting that they are a bad person because they committed what are essentially acts of violence on other people. The same thing is happening with the transsexual conversation, because if you admit, as we are now seeing, and I called this years ago, if we are seeing the outcomes of forcing these transitions on children, and they are forced because you're seeing lawsuits now play out where people are winning millions of dollars in damages because they were essentially forced down this path by bad psychologists, bad medical professionals, bad teachers, bad parenting advice, all these things forcing them down this path of affirmative care when they did not have transsexualism. They did not have that specific ailment that resolves itself if you get a cure of having hormone therapy treatment or your breast chopped off or, your things flipped inside out. They're suing because they had autism or they had some sort of just, a developmental hiccup because they were going through puberty, or they just had depression, or they might have had some sort of minor schizophrenia or bipolar issue. That was treated as though transsexualism was the cure. You're now seeing all those people get their money from juries that look at this and look at the assessing, they're assessing the actual evidence that's coming out and saying, wow, this is wrong. You're seeing continent of Europe reverse itself on the entire concept of transing the kids and barring children from having transitions at a young age. You're seeing the American Society of Plastic Surgeons, as discussed on, I think, 2 shows ago. The American Society of Plastic Surgeons say, we, after reviewing the evidence or lack thereof evidence to back transing the kids, God damn it. Right now, they just started sawing next to my house because there's fucking renovations going on the house next door to me. So apologies if that's coming through. But they just said, we don't see any evidence that supports having sexual surgeries on minors. And then, wow, the American Medical Association follows suit after for years condemning and ostracizing anybody who would question the narrative. Despite all this evidence, the trans issue still in America is one that is so red hot because if you then were wrong about this, if you supported and said trans rights and how dare you try to limit this and every kid should be treated and affirmed and transitioned, you are a bad person. You helped harm children, or you directly harmed children in the case of a lot of these parents that were lied to or these medical practitioners. So you cannot admit you were wrong because you would be an evil person. The same thing is playing out with the Epstein files. Let's transition, into the Epstein files. So you've got troves and troves of files being dumped. And honestly, at this point, I'm waiting to see what happens because 3 million more emails just dropped. It's coming so fast and so furious. I'll have a few thoughts on it, but I'm waiting to see what else comes out and what shakes out from this tree. But with the Epstein files, you're seeing definitive proof that Pizzagate was real. This was code and is code that these people had used. We can't say definitively that they were talking about children when they're talking about pizza, but considering the fact that you have a convicted pedophile that we have distinct and incontrovertible evidence that there were children that were under the age of 15 that were in this man's control and being used sexually and trafficked, it's hard to think that it's something else. So we don't have proof of what it was. But we know that pizza and toppings and grape soda and all of these different phrases were factually code words in these emails. We're seeing the fact that Epstein is involved in all of these different blackmail aspects, that he is tied in with different oligarchs and people at the highest levels of power. We're seeing billionaires trust this man with their power of attorney, only to find out that he was cheating and stealing, and going behind their backs. Lex Wexler, God, I can't remember this guy's name, but whatever. One of these billionaires, found this out and ostracized him. You're seeing Bill Gates, is using him for Russian prostitutes and catching STDs from him and then drugging or wanting to drug his wife with Epstein's help. You're seeing another billionaire, Leon, I think it was Black, using Epstein to try to resolve a Russian model scandal where he was cheating on his wife with this Russian model who was extorting him for millions and millions of dollars. And Epstein's the one in there threatening to have her killed by the FSB. We know that there is a lot going on in here in the highest levels of power. And yes, there were children involved. And yes, there's blackmail involved. And yes, there's stealing and scandal involved. Yet the people who have said from the beginning, and there's a lot of them out there, this is a nothing burger. There's nothing here. There's nothing to pay attention to. There's nothing to track. These people who have poo-pooed this shit will never admit that there was anything there. We could find actual pictures of Epstein eating a baby, and they will never admit that that was anything. They will say, "Oh, I don't think this was real. This is whatever." They will write it off. It doesn't matter how much smoke there is. It doesn't matter how much fire there is, because of the same bad people concept. And really, I view most of my life through this lens at this point in time, because it really defines how people act so perfectly in our social media conscious society, where everything you do and say is put out there to the world on social and amplified. And unless you go through and delete all those old tweets, it is on record. You've been judged. You have judged, right? It's out there. It's the bad people theory. And the bad people theory says, just like the trans, just like the COVID, just like, climate change is another one. If you are wrong about the Epstein stuff, you are a bad person, because you have rooted for these files to be nothing. You've agreed that they shouldn't come out. You've yelled at the people that are trying to do the right thing about it. You are a bad person. You have gone along essentially with child pedophilia and blackmail and all these other terrible things that we know exist in the world, and you've denied for all this time. So these people will never let this go. They will die on the hill kicking and screaming, rather than say, you know what? I was wrong about this. Holy shit. I'm sorry. Let's find a way to get at these people. Let's put it behind us, or let's find a way to solve these problems. They will never do that. Now, in regards to that, Thomas Massie is one of the greatest representatives that has ever existed in this country. He puts forward solid, sound arguments for everything he does. He has absolute principles that he follows, and you could agree with those principles or not, but he follows them, and they're very open. And he fights for what he feels is the rights of actual Americans to uncover the truth, to rein in the grift, to rein in the evil. So he's been fighting to have these files released. And of course, he was attacked by Trump, who's trying to primary him. Just like Thomas Massie, you'll recall, was also the guy that fought tooth and nail against the massive COVID budget spending, the trillions spent, calling it one of the greatest affronts. Well, this is not his exact phrase, but one of the greatest affronts to, American society that's ever been perpetrated. He was attacked for that too during the COVID era. How can you? Don't you think of anything? Oh my God, this man, he's so evil. Well, he was right. And just like with that, he fights for these Epstein files to be released. He and Marjorie Taylor Greene are out there, and a couple of people, Ro Khanna, another one. He's fighting to get these files out there because they have evil shit in them, and they're redacting things that should never be redacted, the names of co-conspirators, because they happen to be tied in with the government, or happen to be tied in with other powerful entities, or are CIA protected assets. And by the way, the CIA needs to tell us what's going on with Epstein. He was clearly on their asset list. We have the proof of that. Why? Give us an explanation. But Massie now is constantly being attacked as un-American and a traitor. People call Massie a traitor. How stupid do you have to be? How broken does your brain have to be? Your brain has to be so broken that trans is the answer, right? To call Thomas Massie a traitor. Massie Derangement Syndrome is the only thing I can call it. All of these stupid ass, paid most of the time sycophants for Donald Trump and the Trump cult. And yes, it is a cult, because this man can do no wrong in the eyes of so many of these people. Calling Thomas Massie a traitor, or coming after Massie, not appreciating him for what he is, doing the right things, have MDS. Massie Derangement Syndrome is the new Trump derangement syndrome, because these people will not acknowledge anything that Thomas Massie does. They will not acknowledge a goddamn thing or give him an inch. The Epstein files is another perfect example of this, just like COVID was. Another perfect example of a man who's doing the right thing. And even if there was nothing in the files, which we know there is something in the files, quite a few things, even if there was nothing, fighting for transparency in something that the Trump administration had made one of their priorities and a big thing, and released the binders. And then, now it looks like a massive cover-up. So they played this so horribly wrong. They built this up to then go, never mind, we don't want to do anything about it. Asinine. And then to have Pam Bondi go out there and make an absolute clown of herself arguing that the Dow is at 50,000. Oh, okay, well, why should we worry about the Epstein files? Oh, I'm sorry, because there's children being raped. That's why we're worried about it. The Dow and children being raped don't intersect unless I can buy stock in those children. And you know what? Probably not a good investment. Seems like a lot of those people turn up dead or have horrible mental issues for the rest of their lives. Probably not a stock that you want to be buying into. Point being, we live in such a topsy-turvy world. And like I said, the bad people theory of this ties in perfectly well with the Epstein files, with the attacking of Thomas Massie, because just like with anything else, if you are a Trumper for life, well, you're excusing a lot of very bad shit. You're excusing a lot of broken promises. You're excusing a lot of warfare tactics that we did not think would be something that Trump would be going down the road of. You're seeing a lot of backing of Israel and every horrible thing that they're doing in Gaza. You're seeing a lot of people that are ride or die with Donald Trump because they know if they acknowledge all the bad things that Donald Trump's doing, including covering up the Epstein files and redacting shit and being complicit in that, you are a very bad person. And so they can never admit that that is wrong. They have to attack Thomas Massie because their God King is attacking Thomas Massie, so on and so forth. Okay, let's move on to something else here. This is hilarious. My God, I've got to share this. So this is a incredible example of where journalism is currently. And by the way, so the Washington Post had slashed I think a third of its staff recently, which gives me, as a publicist, it makes me sad because all these media companies are slashing journalists and it makes my job a lot harder. But at the same time, most of these people deserve to have their jobs slashed. And I'll show you a perfect example of this. So this is from a study. Well, actually, I can't even say this is there we go. So this is a journalistic outlet, KQED, which is probably, some PBS station, reporting on a UCLA. So it's equally damning to academia as it is to KQED for reporting on this idiocy. But KQED says, under science, because this is supposedly science, same-sex couples face higher climate change risks, new UCLA study shows. Now, why the fuck is UCLA commissioning a study on something this fucking stupid? I don't know. But I'll tell you the outcome and how they came to this conclusion because it'll really get your gander up. So the study concluded that the same-sex couples face higher climate change risks because more same-sex couples have less money. I'm sorry, not less money. They have less kids, so they have more money to spend, right? The typical thing, married, 2 incomes, no kids. So same-sex couples predominantly do not have children. And so many of them have the money to live by the beach. That was the finding of this groundbreaking, brilliant fucking study. That's the impact they're saying climate change is going to have on same-sex couples. So woe are the gays because they have more money and can live in nicer places by the beach. That's what these assholes are calling science and reporting on. Never mind that we know that's all horseshit, that the sea levels have not risen, that we've got thousands of years old structures that are still very visible, that have been vaguely underwater for decades, not decades, thousands of years, eons even. Never mind, we've got all that proof. Never mind, all the people that are telling us climate change is a thing continuously are buying up properties right next to the beach and on islands. The same people that are fly to a climate conference and tell you that it's going to be underwater. Never mind that islands have actually reemerged from the oceans as of late in the last 5 years, which the scientists can't explain it. This is the people. This is the study that's going to show you that these poor same-sex couples, woe is them, because climate change is coming to get you. Fuck off. I mean, science. Catch the fever. Oh, God. Okay. Let's do one more topic here, which is on the Netherlands and their unrealized gains tax. So the Netherlands has had their house passed a 36% unrealized capital gains tax. Now, on its face, this is psychotic. Psychotic. Because number one, you are getting taxed on money you haven't made yet. You are getting taxed on money that, by the way, the stock market is incredibly volatile. So depending on when they take this temperature of your stock up and down, left and right, who knows? And also, let's not forget that you're going to have to sell the stock off in many situations in order to pay for the cost of this tax. So the way it's going to work, they're going to levy a tax. They're going to take your account. They're going to say, okay, well, you've got $50,000 in unrealized gains. We'll tax you 36% of that. So now you owe 15,000, roughly, 17,000. Okay, here's your tax bill. And it's due in 4 months. Oh, super fucking duper. So now I either have to have that money in the bank in my savings and I have to eradicate, a good portion of my savings, or I have to raid my 401k or whatever they have over the Netherlands, or I have to sell the stock off. So now money I put into an investment for good reason, right? Money that I'm probably depending on to get to later in life, or is making me money that's going to help me out in the long run, paying for dividends, etc. I now have to sell off a good portion of that stock, because let's not forget too, you're selling the stock off, so you're getting taxed on the gains of that as well. It's not just the unrealized gains. Now I'm selling it off, getting the tax on the gains. Now I have to put that money to the government. I'm not going to get any of that shit back. And now I have less stock for the future. So I've reduced the amount of stock I own. I've been forced to liquidate the stock by God, he'll say 50,000. So yeah, you sell off, like 25% of your stock every time, let's say. The fallout of this is going to be astronomical, predictable, and idiotic. Because number one, you're going to see all of the high gains people, the people that own the most stocks, just leave the Netherlands. And they're proposing like a 5-year period where they can still tax you after you flee the Netherlands. Isn't that great how they trap you into this bullshit? So basically, you have to renounce your citizenship in order to avoid this. They tax you for 5 years after this. So number one, you're going to have people flee. You're going to have a massive exodus of that, those people that have a lot of money. Number two, you're going to see a crash of whatever marketplace that is. And I don't know, if the Netherlands uses the same, marketplace as the broader EU. I'm not sure exactly. I haven't looked into it that thoroughly with that aspect. But you're going to cause a crash in the marketplace because you're forcing people to sell off massive amount of stocks. And specifically, this is where it really gets ugly. Specifically, what do you think the people are going to own the most stock in the Netherlands? Well, presumably it's in companies in the Netherlands. So you are going to, with one fell swoop, you're going to rip away people's savings. You're going to tank the stocks of your major manufacturing hubs or your major, whatever it is, tech hubs in the Netherlands. You're going to tank those stocks as people sell them off in order to pay for these fucking ridiculous tax bills. So you're also going to hamper people's ability to save and, again, their 401k, their pensions, because you're blasting these stocks in your own country. You're going to drop the value of those companies within your country, enabling foreign entities that don't have this horseshit to gobble up companies in your region. And then what do you think is going to happen? Oh, that's right. You're going to have these companies that have now dropped so much of their stock valuation be limited in what they can reinvest in. If they try to sell their own stock or buy back stock, they can't do that anymore. Now they're going to have to lay off workers who now also don't have their pensions lined up. You're going to have a massive collapse within that country. Like, none of this makes sense. And all of it has a very, very obvious fallout. And yet these asinine politicians are pushing it through. And people in the Netherlands are going to take it on the chin. I mean, this is what I keep wondering over and over and over again in these situations. How far can you push people? I mean, how far can it go? I thought in Iran, which, by the way, there's rumblings that we might be going to war with Iran very soon. Like the people of Iran, I thought had finally hit the wall, but I guess they got that uprising put down. In the UK, you have people that have, like, oh my God, there was some horrible story. I can't remember if it was in the UK. I think maybe it was Germany. But you've got people that are going to jail for saying mean things about immigrants. And meanwhile, rapist immigrants are getting 5-year sentences reduced to 2 years. There was a psychotic story about some, illegal immigrant. I think it was in Germany, stabbed his wife in the head 258 times, and then took a video of him holding the baby they had together in a pool of her blood. And the man got 5 years because the judge said, well, he has a low IQ. What? This guy should be in jail for life, if not put to the death penalty. I mean, my God. And this continuously is happening. When do you rise up? I mean, just the past day, there was they're calling him a far right supporter, but this is a man who I've read different stories. And it's hard to get a bead because the leftists have their super spin on this shit. And the right, of course, has their own spin on it. But from what I can gather, this Frenchman had been out at what I've read is a pro-female protest because the immigration situation in France has just skyrocketed with the amount of rapes and women not feeling safe and being assaulted, the amount of pickpocketry. All of this shit has gone through the roof to the point where women, don't feel safe. And I've seen videos of women walking around with dogs and pigs and stuff like that to try to ward off these various, groups. But you have a man who was chased down and beaten by the leftist French Antifa and beaten to death in the street. And there's video of it. So you have the leftists going, well, I saw this one asshole basically saying, well, he was out there and he deserved what he got. Okay, so you're just condoning beating people to death down in the streets. Well, the reaction to that was that the French, at least some of them, seem to have had enough. And they went out there and found, they're hunting down Antifa now. And I'm not saying vigilante justice is a good thing. Okay. I'm not advocating for open street warfare here. But these organizations, I have no problem with Donald Trump saying Antifa is a terrorist organization because they are. They are a terrorist organization. They operate exactly as one does. They are coordinated in their attacks. They are violent. They operate on fear and aggression. They are a terrorist group in every possible sense of the word. And Antifa the world over are the same. The same. So you have people finally fighting back against this shit. You're seeing a lot more videos of people fighting back and taking things into their own hands because they've been abandoned by their government. And that's just a straight fact. And that's why I talk about when the time for open revolution is. And it certainly seems like it's here for a lot of these nations. A lot of the European nations, for goddamn sure. Because when your country has abandoned its core duty, right? The core duty of your country is to provide basic protections for your liberty and your ability to live your life. If it has abandoned that, as it very much clearly has in all of these nations, you've got fucking Macron saying that free speech does not exist without government. It's bullshit without government being able to control it. These are authoritarians who do not have your best interests in mind, that want to curtail the narrative and control what's out there, to arrest you for speaking up against the regime, and to abandon the basic civil duties of protecting you in order to bring in this mass group of people that do not share your cultural values, that are aggressive, that are violent. I mean, it is the time. The time is now, people, because I don't think it's going to get any better. The way that these entire AI programs are working, the coordinated efforts of all these governments working in tandem to share information, to have the systems in place, to put you on the blacklist, to monitor your every move. I mean, Amazon got slapped down for that whole thing of hey, find your dog using our Ring and our Blink programs. Well, people are like, fuck this. This is the surveillance state put in action. There comes a time when you have to ask when enough is, when enough is enough, or when that is, pardon me. And obviously, I'm sure there are counter AIs being developed, and we'll see how that future plays out. But when you have people like Macron brazenly and openly, God, I can't talk today. I slept like shit. There was one of the biggest wind and rainstorms I've ever seen in Los Angeles last night, just whipping everything around, beating the house, battering. I put tarps in my windows, both ripped off and blew away. I screwed them in there. They ripped off. Oh my God, the power went out, the dog's barking, my daughter got up in the middle of the night because the power went off. Something horrible. Anyway, but you see, Macron out there saying free speech is bullshit. And the thing that is the most terrifying is not that he thinks that, because of course he does. He's a WEF, little baby fuck clown who is an authoritarian and who wants to control everything and wants the new world order to take over and wants to basically remove all of your freedoms and make you into the drone that they think you are. But it's not that he thinks that. That's the problem. It's that he's saying it out loud proudly to the applause of imbeciles. That is what is terrifying. Okay. That, of course, and, the Buffalo Bills of the world shooting their children and wives in broad daylight. Okay, guys, thank you for tuning in to the show today. Remember, we've got our other show, the First Episode Podcast. You can check that out. That's a comedy show reviewing TV and whatnot. We just did The Burbs with the race and gender swapped lead, which I nicknamed The Blurbs. I'll give you one guess how that went over with me. And we did Dawson's Creek, since James Vanderbeek just passed, and of course was mislabeled as a Trumpist fascist piece of shit by the left psychos of the world, despite the fact that he was not a Trump supporter. But it chose to tell you where we are. Oh, and don't forget, Woke Word Wars. Woke Word Wars. Get yourself a copy. It is mounds of fun. Hilarious game making fun of the left and PC culture. All right, guys, that's it for me, Brian McWilliams and the Lions of Liberty Network here on Mean Age Daydream. Keep those electric eyes on me, babe, and keep that ray gun to my head. Talk to you later.